Three Caballeros, three gay caballeros, they say.
Hello and welcome back to Waly Gisnep's Animated Classics, where we're rewatching the Walt Disney animated classics to decide which ones are worthy of being included in our list of animated classics. As always, I'm joined by Ben. Ben, what are we looking at today?
Liam, today we've got a veritable double bill on our hands. We are moving into the period of Disney history known as the package films. Before you get too excited, these are films where they package together numerous shorts from their catalogue to produce feature-length films. This was during World War II, so resources were limited. The first two we're going to be looking at are Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros. I'm almost certainly going to pronounce a lot of this wrong, so apologies in advance.
I, on the other hand, am going to be pronouncing everything absolutely perfectly. Now, as a bit of a spoiler, I don't know about you, Ben, but I'm happy to say that I don't think any of the next 6 films are going to be making it onto the Waly Gisnep list of animated classics. Is that fair to say?
I wouldn't want to reveal my hand too early, but that is very fair to say. And what we've done is we've paired these 6 films up because they broadly link up in a couple of ways. So the first two we're looking at are both exploring aspects of Central and South American culture.
You mentioned that these were produced during the onset of World War II, and this kind of explains a lot of the cheaper presentation of this as well as the scaled back ideas. A big part of that was that the Walt Disney Company was recruited by the American government to just produce propaganda, so they didn't really have the resources available to make films on the scale of Bambi and Dumbo. They maybe could have made another Snow White, but nobody wanted that.
Instead, we got Donald Duck dressed as a Nazi.
One thing that's very interesting about this, and I'm not sure if you know this, Ben, but these two films themselves are part of the propaganda machine.
Oh, really?
So they're part of what was known as the Good Neighbour programme. So for a bit of historical context for you all, if you're not familiar with World War II, big war, involved most of the world. And while there were very real and very horrific reasons and causes for conflict, mostly taking place in Europe, the whole world was in this situation of essentially picking sides. And the USA was, whilst not directly involved in the war at the point of the production of this, they were on the side of the Allies and supporting the Allies. However, their closest neighbours in South America, everything was a bit up in the air. So they were actually encouraged by the government to try to improve relations with South America to try and tempt them onto the side of the Allies. And the result of this was producing Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros.
With these two films then, what we have effectively is a film and then another film that is almost a making of. Because these package films are, to be blunt, quite a drag. Rather than us both watching all of them, we're splitting them up so we both don't have to rewatch all of them. Liam asked me which one I wanted, and I remember that Saludos Amigos is about half an hour shorter than the Three Caballeros, so I picked that one on that basis alone.
And on that note, Ben, I'm going to hand over to you. What are your thoughts on Saludos Amigos then?
Going into it, the narrator makes it very clear that this is an opportunity for their animators to go to South America and learn about the culture and draw some cartoons based on it. And as soon as I heard that, I was thinking, this is going to get very offensive very quickly. But surprisingly, it's generally quite nice. As you say, they were trying to be positive here. There's not that much in the way of stereotypes. There's some dodgy stuff we'll get to in a moment. But on the whole, it's just very wholesome. And again, for the 1940s, saying, hey, there's other countries in the world. Some of them are quite nice. Is a very wholesome message.
Despite the fact that this was pushed by the government and is essentially propaganda, I do like the idea of it. Again, we mentioned in Fantasia that Walt Disney was keen to explore what animation was useful for. And in this case, what he wanted to sort of do was introduce travel and tourism to a new generation before travel and tourism was really accessible to the wider world. So on a pure mission statement level, I like the film. However, from memory, I don't remember them doing a great job of exploring the entire continent of South America. I think that there are 4 segments in this.
There are, yes. So we have 4 sections, which I'll go through. And these are all linked in by a narrator and footage of Disney animators in different parts of South America, getting inspiration for different things.
I seem to remember it being intercut with footage of the animators on the plane, and it's a very 1940s snapshot of air travel. Just all of these men in suits smoking cigars and harassing air stewardesses.
So even from the off, the narrator says, it's an unusual trip. And I was like, it's not really, you're just going to South America. It's not that weird. And it says they set off from somewhere on the West Coast, I presume California. And then it says 3 days later they get to Rio de Janeiro. I was like, what route did they fly via the North Pole? I was thinking maybe planes were just slower then. I was thinking, but then also they can't go that slow. They still have to fly, right? Like,
I think they just needed to make frequent refueling trips for cigars and whiskey.
Ah, of course. And we then see them, quite rudely in my opinion, sat in a marketplace just drawing the people who are walking past. Initially, it's very wholesome. The narrator says, hey, these are just people going to the market, just like we have shops back at home, and you think that's really nice. And then as soon as the animators start drawing people, they become racist caricatures. You can literally see the person they're drawing, and then you see it on paper, and you think, well, the person doesn't look anything like that.
There's definitely an undertone throughout this that they were trying to relate South America to the experience back home, and there is that idea of, remember these things we have? There's lots of similar things throughout the world, and I'm like, that's not really the point of tourism. You're not supposed to find things that are familiar, you're supposed to open yourself up to the new. Isn't there even an entire segment which is just, you know how the West has cowboys? Mexico's got them too.
Yes. So there's a section with Goofy where they take him out of Texas and place him... I'm trying to remember if they specify where it is. I don't think it's Mexico. I think it's further south than that. But we see him basically doing all the things a cowboy does. There's a charming section about killing ostriches, which is just lovely.
Is this with the bolas?
Yes, they say, oh, throw the bolus, and the ostrich looks terrified and runs away. Now, we can pretend that throwing a bolus at a running ostrich is just a fun bit of sport, but that ostrich is going to die as soon as you do that. But we'll come to Goofy in a moment. The 4 sections are, we get a section of Donald Duck being a stereotypical tourist. We get the section of Goofy pretending to be a South American cowboy with a horse that weirdly seems to fancy him. We get a very forgettable section about a plane flying over the Andes, which is so boring and forgettable, I literally don't have any notes on it.
When I first watched Saludos Amigos, my first reaction was they explored the entire continent of South America, supposedly. They came up with 4 segments, and one of them was about the plane ride.
Well, the last section's even better because this is a predominantly musical section featuring a new character, Joe Carioca, who they clearly thought was going to be the next Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck. Spoiler warning, he's not, because you've never heard of him before.
As an overall package, then, I think the film is lacking. Are any of the individual segments worth revisiting? Is there any of them that you liked, or are they all pretty weak?
They're just all very insubstantial. It's just a rapid fire of either very weak jokes or just facts. Part of Goofy's story is literally just, here's the names for everything, which is quite nice and educational, but not particularly interesting. Also, someone just gives you 20 new Portuguese words that you've never heard. You're not going to remember anything. Donald Duck's section is a bit about him harassing tourists, and a bit of him just messing around on a lake. It seems like he can't swim, which is quite weird for a duck. And I swear to God, there's a section where Donald calls the narrator a big bastard.
I remember something where you just have to go back and put the subtitles on, and it's not quite right. Do you think the people at Disney, both at the time and especially today, really regret giving Donald Duck that voice? Because they've had to keep that going for years now, and it's not good.
It must kill the throats of every voice actor who's done it, because it's very unpleasant to do.
It's unpleasant to do, it's unpleasant to listen to, but they did it the first time he had a voice, and they've had to stick with it since.
And that's basically Donald Duck's story. It does show up a little bit in the end section. Goofy's thing we've talked about. The only bit actually that is genuinely worth watching is during the ostrich hunting, they say, let's replay that in slow motion. And then they reanimate it, so initially you think it's the same section being played slowly, but actually different things happen. I was watching it going, actually that's pretty good.
I think overall I'm disappointed that the animators didn't really flex their sort of creative muscles very much with this. It is quite by the numbers. You've got a couple of segments like that which are really enjoyable, but they're just too few and far between. So what about this last section?
Well, we do have the aeroplane section, but as I say, completely forgettable. And we intersperse this with the animators who, just to note, are all wearing three-piece suits in Argentina and Brazil in the middle of the day. I don't know how they didn't die. And the last section is something they said they were specifically inspired about. There's a point where the narrator says, most of Brazil's funny stories are about a parrot. I don't know much about Brazilian culture. I suspect that's probably not true, but okay. And then we get Jose Carioca, sometimes called Joe Carioca. I guess Jose and Joe, one's meant to be the anglicised version of the other.
Yeah, so I think the abbreviation Joe from Jose was just done to make it a bit more palatable to the sort of English-speaking world, because I think with the Portuguese language, Jose Carioca's name is shortened to Z Carioca, because I believe Z is the affectionate shortening of Jose.
That makes a lot of sense. In terms of character design, you can definitely see he's from the same school of design as Donald Duck. He doesn't wear trousers either.
He does smoke a cigar, though.
He's very jazzy. He smokes a cigar. He drinks alcohol like it's no thing. He's a pretty dandy character, though the one thing I will say is it's hard to describe with just words, so I suggest you Google it, but his eyes have a horrible, creepy dead look to them that is really disturbing.
I only encountered Jose Carioca this year when I was going through these films, and I really like him.
He's way cooler than Donald, for one.
So much cooler than Donald. Just to give you a bit of context for my biases, I love birds. Big fan of birds, particularly parrots, particularly New World parrots, so all of your sort of your Amazon parrots. To have this green parrot show up, I'm just like, yep, he's one of my favourite animals, and he's just cool and jazzy, and he's swinging an umbrella. I love him. And they actually have him speaking Portuguese, which is great. They got a Portuguese actor to voice him and to do the singing, and whilst he's speaking English in a broken way, it's interwoven with Portuguese, and I'm like, this is a great way. Again, if you're going for that tourism aspect and trying to introduce travel and tourism to a young generation which had not done it at this point, one of the key aspects you really need to go for is the use of language and introducing them to the idea that not everyone speaks your language, and I just think it was done really well. I've got a lot of love for Jose.
I suspect he's one of the reasons why, even though these films are fairly obscure in the USA and in Europe, in South America, I gather these are very popular and much more seen as classic films there because of this willingness to embrace that culture. Bear in mind, feature-length animation had been around 5-6 years at this point, so getting, albeit a quite lazily packaged together, feature animated film about aspects of your culture featuring your language, of course that's going to appeal to people in Argentina and Brazil, etc.
Aspects of your culture packaged together, constantly saying, look how similar all this is to America.
Yeah, it's not subtle.
I remember this last segment being really musical and colourful, more akin to what we saw in Fantasia. It's a bit more sort of out there and surreal.
Yes, it's more expressionist, and I believe they had the music specifically composed by a Brazilian composer for this section.
What I'm really getting from this film is that the idea of it and the way they approached it was pretty good. It's made with a fair amount of respect for its subject matter, and I'm not sure if this was because of the war, but the execution's not great. I think I like that last segment, and if you're listening and you haven't seen it, I do recommend looking up the Donald Duck and Jose Carioca musical segment. It is delightful. Rest of the film, I can sort of take or leave.
Fundamentally, most people engage more with a narrative, and this film doesn't really have a narrative. Much like the Fantasia films we talked about earlier, it's intrinsically harder to engage with these abstract demonstrations, no matter how nice they sound, no matter how pretty they look.
You say that, however, my film, The Three Caballeros, comes very close to being an actual film with a narrative.
Well, let's start talking about that then, because Jose Carioca was seemingly so popular in Saludos Amigos, he returns.
Yeah, so we get a kind of sequel to Saludos Amigos, and again, it's made up of segments. However, there's more of a narrative arc going on in this one because it focuses on the character of Donald Duck, who is opening presents from his friends in South America, which when you start the film, your first thought will be, oh boy, it's a clip show package where Donald Duck is going to be watching segments. And the first few segments definitely are that. They feel like they were from the cutting room floor of the first film. So we have a segment about a penguin in the South Pole, that famous region of South America, and he wants to go travelling to somewhere warm and sunny. This segment is narrated by Sterling Holloway, and he's introduced as Professor Holloway, and I'm not sure if that's real or they just sort of gave him the honorific.
He's never called Professor Holloway after this point or before this point. How very strange. I'd forgotten about that.
It's a nice little segment. You've got this little penguin, and he cuts his house away from the ice and sails to the equator, during which his house melts. He finally gets to an island in the Galapagos. Is the Galapagos part of South America, really? This is just showing my ignorance here.
Look, as two British men, maybe we shouldn't be the ones to comment on what is and isn't part of South America, because people who inhabit the Falklands may have different views to us.
Anyway, the penguin reaches the equator and then just heads due west to reach the Galapagos. He gets there, he gets a tan, and he's like, oh, I want to go home. And it kind of ends there with Sterling Holloway saying, well, that's human nature for you, even if you're a penguin.
I don't know what kind of moral that is.
I think the moral is that you should go travelling, but you shouldn't immigrate.
I mean, it feeds into the propaganda thing. You want to go travelling but not emigrate? Become a soldier. I believe this is also the only time in any of the animated classics we visit Antarctica, the seventh continent.
I actually realised there's quite a nice theme going on in this film as I looked through my notes for the second segment, in that the whole film seems to be exploring the lives of the birds of South America, which is quite nice. But then this second segment is actually about a little flying donkey called Burrito. I know I said it was about birds, but what I'm saying is you're introduced to it thinking it's a condor. There's one of the cowboys from the first film, there's someone telling a story of when he was a boy. It's actually a really nice segment where they interweave, the narrator is interacting with the actors. So he will say things and the actors, in this case the little boy, will sort of react to what the animator has said. Much like if you've ever played the game Bastion.
I have played the game Bastion. I suspect this narrator's a lot less gravelly and cool, though.
He's pretty gravelly and cool, actually. It's quite a nice little segment. So it's just about this flying donkey and how this little boy and his flying donkey con a horse race out of all of their money and then fly away with it.
Just an innocent tale of stealing money using a scam. Wait, this donkey's called Burrito, did you say?
Yes, because burrito is the... Ooh, I'm getting my languages wrong here, but burrito is the word, it means little donkey. The food is named after the donkeys.
Huh.
So much in the same way that we have, goslings, they have donkeys and burritos.
Wait, like we've got goslings. We don't have a food called a gosling.
We should.
Baby geese and Ryan Gosling. That's all we've got.
So those are the first segments, which are just Donald Duck watching a film reel that he's been sent, which as far as lazy framing devices go, is pretty up there. But then the film kind of kicks into a new gear and actually becomes pretty good. So Donald Duck goes to opening his presents. Oh, I should point out, it says on his presents that they're birthday presents, and his birthday is Friday the 13th. Now, I'm not sure if that means it doesn't have a year or a month, it just means that his birthday is on Friday the 13th, but how does that work?
So potentially some years he could have multiple birthdays and some years no birthday.
Mathematically, I'll always have at least one, but that's a conversation for another time.
No. People listen to this podcast for Disney insights and basic arguments about provable facts.
I suppose he is a duck, so he ages at a different rate to people, so he could have multiple birthdays in a year. Though this duck is currently, 80 years old. So Donald Duck has all of his birthday presents. He opens up this book that was sent to him from Jose Carioca, and when he opens the book, there's a little Jose Carioca on it. And from that point, it's the two of them exploring South America via this magical book.
Wait, so did Jose send the book and it's another version of him, or did he send himself in a book?
Donald opens the book and there's a little version of Jose Carioca in it, which, if he did send himself, he's managed to shrink himself down into it.
Well, the alternative is that he's made a tiny version of himself and put that inside, which is even more complicated and difficult, surely.
On that note, there is actually a point where they start magically changing sizes in order to enter the book, and Donald Duck turns to Jose and says, "Oh no, I'm a midget. Oh no, you're a midget too."
That's aged well.
It was one of those moments where I'm like, wait, what did he say? They almost get away with it with the Donald Duck voice.
I like that he's not only horrified that his own body's changed, but he just finds the concept of, quote, midgets so horrifying that seeing it happen to Jose drives him to terror as well.
So I have to say, if the film was just this, where it's just Donald getting a book from Jose, they open it up and explore South America, that's a really good framing device, and each segment leads into the next. If it was just that, I'd like this film. Again, I like the idea behind these films. Execution is where they sort of fall down, but if they'd just done this and made it a 40-minute feature, I think it would have been great.
So what are the highlights while Jose and Donald explore South America again?
Well, what makes this film really interesting is that there's a lot of interaction with live-action humans.
My abiding memory of this film is a section where Donald is on a hang glider harassing actual human women.
We're going to get to that. It begins with Jose taking Donald into the book, and they visit a town in which there is a real woman selling cookies, and she's being chased by a gaggle of men who are all trying to win her affections. And Jose, the cool character that he is, just kind of looks on and is like, the city of love, where a single woman will be harassed by 20 men. Donald, as an outsider, sees all of the men as a challenge and instead tries to win her affections. And if that's creepy, it only gets worse from here.
And let's just emphasise that these are human people and he is a duck.
He's an animated duck as well. Just to clarify, if that makes it worse or better, I'm not sure.
I guess it's better than a real duck, maybe? You said in an earlier episode you found Daisy to be one of the sexiest Disney characters, so I think we can agree that animated duck is better than actual duck.
Firstly, not one of, the... But yeah, I suppose an anthropomorphic duck chasing after a woman. And at one point, he almost murders a man. He gets a giant hammer, because cartoons have got this ability to just pull crazy objects out of thin air that, if you interacted with a real human, would genuinely hurt them. He pulls this big hammer out of thin air and is going to hit the man who is currently flirting with this woman over the head with it, presumably killing him. He's only stopped by Jose jumping in, pulling him aside with an umbrella and being like, "Oh, Donald."
I don't know why Jose hangs around with Donald. Jose's got it all going on, and Donald is frankly a loose cannon.
And yeah, they just sort of walk around this town and explore it, and Jose's trying to explain the culture of love in this city. And then there's a really nice musical segment, again, very similar to the one in Saludos Amigos. Lots of animated instruments, quite similar to the soundbar from Fantasia, actually. It's a really nice segment. So they leave the book, and in order to continue their exploration, they introduce another friend, and this is the third Caballeros, which is Panchito Pistales, who is a Mexican rooster, I believe.
It does feel very premature that they've got Donald Duck, an established successful character. They introduce Jose, and then in Jose's second outing they go, we need more bird characters. Just build your brand slowly, rather than having, the Donald Duck extended cinematic universe.
I don't mind Panchito. I don't love him as much as Jose. He's kind of a hyperactive gunslinger. Similar to Jose, he has perfect grasp of language as well. He can speak without a terrible speech impediment, which is making me think that there is something very wrong with Donald Duck.
Only now you're coming to that conclusion.
Daisy speaks normally, doesn't she?
Frankly, she can do better. All I'm saying is, let's just join up the dots here. Jose Carioca is a cool, charming guy. We've established Donald is willing to kill the competition. Daisy's very sexy. It doesn't take a big jump to say, why haven't we seen Jose Carioca in 70 years?
They have actually tried reintroducing them as the Three Caballeros. There's a series from a couple of years ago. It's not great, but it's the same characters again, minus the cigar, obviously. So we now have the Three Caballeros, and they sing a nice little song about how they're all mates, and wherever one of them goes, the 1, 2, and 3 goes. It's just a nice little segment, but Donald Duck is definitely contributing the least to this trio. And then we get to the segment with the magic carpet. Panchito Pistales brings his magic carpet with which to explore the rest of South America in as short a time as possible, and I believe this is what your memory is of. They go flying over a beach, and Jose and Panchito, they're used to the beautiful women of South America. They don't mind. They could just fly above and go, look at this wonderful country. Donald Duck's never seen anything like it. So he commandeers the magic carpet and just dives down to the beach to harass as many women as possible. Now, I'm assuming this was a female-only beach, because there's no men in sight. And I assume, if that is the case, they've gone there for, a bit of peace and quiet and not to be harassed. And then out of nowhere, these 3 birds on a magic carpet appear.
Just to be clear, we're not talking about some sleazy chat-up lines. We're talking about the mad flailing of an anthropomorphic duck.
And here's the thing is, there's about 20 minutes of the film left at this point, and those 20 minutes are just Donald Duck trying to get close to these women.
Just to go back one as well, maybe I'm showing my ignorance here. I thought magic carpets were kind of linked to Arabia and the Middle East, not Mexico.
That's a good point, actually. It's definitely some kind of flying rug of a kind. Maybe there's something in folklore. If you're familiar with South American folklore and this is something that exists, do let us know. Always looking to have these sort of gaps filled in, particularly with these films.
Or if you know for a fact this isn't, then let us know as well, because then we can just say, the animators just went, oh well, Mexico's a hot part of the world, so's Arabia, they're basically the same thing, and we can call them out on it.
Why would they need a magic carpet to get around? They're birds.
Well, we've already established in Saludos Amigos Donald can't swim. And he can't fly. He's the worst duck ever.
I've got in my notes here, there is a line when they first get to the beach where Jose hands Donald a telescope and he says, take this telescope and have a look at what you might call the hot stuff.
Well, I take back everything nice I said about Jose. What a creep.
Out of all of this segment, there is one really positive element to it, which I have not been able to figure out. So whilst Donald is harassing these women, he starts playing a chase game with them where they blindfold him, and you've just got these live action women running around the beach, and their director tells them that, we'll put something in post that's chasing you. So they're running away from nothing on this beach. Then at one point they start playing this game with him where 4 women have this blanket and they're each holding a corner, and Donald is in the blanket, and they're pulling the blanket and throwing him into the air, and then he'll fall and they'll catch him. And the blanket is live action and sinks. And as they pull it, he launches into the air and the blanket goes flat. And I can't quite work out how they were doing it. It's just a really nice example of how you merge live action and animation in a really early time as well.
Yeah, it's easy to just think of things like Who Framed Roger Rabbit as setting the groundwork for that. But Disney were experimenting with this from a very early time period.
Since you mentioned Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I just want to say, if you're listening and you've not seen a lot of behind-the-scenes footage of that film, I definitely recommend it, because there's a lot of interaction where animated characters are interacting with the real world and affecting it. And a really good way of showing this, as one example, when Roger Rabbit is in the sink, he comes out of the water and spits real water. And if you remove the animation of Roger Rabbit, you can see there was a mechanical device that sort of came out of the water and spat water, and then they animated over that. So I'm thinking maybe for this scene they had a ball that they then animated over with Donald Duck, but that doesn't seem quite right, because I feel that would be quite chaotic if they were throwing a ball. So yeah, I'll have a look into that, because it's a really interesting scene. And again, as one of the early examples of live action and animation, I've got to admire it, even if it's surrounded by sexual harassment.
I'm tempted to have that as the closing thought on the Three Caballeros, but having rewatched it, are there any other moments that stand out in your memory or you think are particularly worth watching for someone who's not seen it before?
I think after Jose shows up, all of it is worth watching. There's a few bits that you might fast forward through, but that's going to come down to personal taste. But it's a strong framing device, and the animated segments are quite nice. One of the final segments is a woman singing, and her face is superimposed over to an animated flower, and it's just very surreal. And then it also cuts to a woman who is dancing, and there's lots of animation going on around her, which is quite nice to think that she was just on an empty sound stage, and they were like, it's all right, we'll draw it all in around you. And she had no idea, because again, there was probably even a language barrier, and there's just these sort of California animators trying to explain what they're going to do, and they don't even know yet because they haven't animated it. And she just has this kind of lost look in her eyes.
You gotta visualize the cartoons. You can't pretend they're not there. You gotta think that they're there. I'm just gonna get my terrible Walt Disney impression in every episode.
And yeah, that's the Three Caballeros. I think it's close to being a good film, but it does just fall short. I actually have a kind of litmus test I've been using for these films, which is, let's pretend I have a 4-year-old child and they're obsessed with this film, which means I have to watch it every Saturday for at least 6 months. Am I going to go mad? I think with the Three Caballeros, I think I'd be alright. It's solid, it's just lacking in a few areas.
With that in mind then, is there anything else we need to talk about?
I think that just leaves us with deciding on who is the sexiest character in each film. Now, I think I'm going to leave Saludos Amigos entirely up to you. So Ben, who do you think is the sexiest character in Saludos Amigos?
Okay, well, this is a film that has actual human people in, which feels a little unfair. So naturally, I'd say probably one of the musicians/dancers in one of the sequences. If you feel that's a cop-out, I'm going to say Goofy's horse, because it is very lustful after Goofy for reasons I don't fully understand. How about the dizzying world of the Three Caballeros?
There's a moment where Donald Duck kind of morphs his body into this very curvy, sexy version of himself with big eyelashes. And I'm tempted to put that, but it's only for a moment, and it would mean I'd be saying Donald Duck for the rest of the film. So given that, I'm going to go with Jose Carioca, because I just love him. He's just a suave, sexy little dude, even if he does keep a telescope for perving on women.
It was a different time.
I realise I've chosen an animated bird over an entire beach of real women, but I've made my choice and I'm sticking to it.
Your choices are getting increasingly strange as this podcast goes on. Well then, the only thing left to decide is, do Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros make the list of Waly Gisnep's animated classics? Liam, where do you fall on these as two separate films?
I don't think I can put Saludos Amigos on the list. I think if the Three Caballeros was just that last 40-minute segment, I'd be tempted to, but in its current form, I don't think either of them can make it. What about you?
I'm even less generous. I feel very confident in saying they're both quite a way away from it. That's not to say that short cartoons can't be great. If we look at some of Disney's more recent output in terms of shorts, they're fantastic. And if you took an hour and a quarter of Disney's absolute best solid gold shorts and packaged them into one film, that may well be worthy of it, but these are not their best shorts by any stretch. The framing devices are a nice idea, but are you going to pick them over watching Bambi? Probably not.
And so that is Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros. Neither have made it into the Waly Gisnep's animated classics. Ben, what are we going to be having a look at next time?
So next time we're looking at what I would feel comfortable calling 2 of the maybe 5 most boring of the animated classics. We are looking at Make Mine Music and Melody Time. These 2 are even more than the 2 we've looked at today, just a bunch of shorts stitched together with almost no framing device at all.
Now I know this time you chose Saludos Amigos because it was shorter. I'm not going to stand for that this time. I think both of these are going to be pretty tough. So I think the only fair way would be if we randomise it.
Fine, I will reluctantly agree to that, but I swear to God, if I get the one with the hats in, I'm gonna be livid.
It's entirely about both of us trying to avoid the hats. On that note, thank you for joining us for another episode of Waly Gisnep's Animated Classics. We'll see you back next time for Make Mine Music and Melody Time.
They say we are birds of a feather.